Hi there and welcome. I'm Allison Lane of Allison Lane Literary, welcoming you to our author chat with this week's incredible guest. Our guest today is a humor and satire writer living in Central Texas. She had spent a lifetime as a human resource and employment lawyer, a career she ended with a drunken text on purpose. And then she's been busy writing for humor publications such as Slackjaw, which we'll talk about in a minute, writing a book about post-retirement life, and watching far too much trashy television. Her essay hooked me completely. Sleep Left Me for Another Woman was published in Slackjaw and was dubbed nearly effing perfect on the podcast Writing Class Radio. She's been published in The Next Tribe, Little Old Lady Comedy, The Haven, Lady Pieces, Points in Case, The Belladonna, Robot Butt. She is Lucie Frost. Welcome, Lucie.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Well, we're so happy to have you, and so thrilled that you're spending your time talking to our writers in the creative nonfiction community about writing humor, which is just hard. Can you just tell us how you got started writing after you retired from law?
Yeah, well, so since I was employed in human resources where we have to be sort of extra careful about what we say, I felt really muzzled kind of my whole life. And I had so much that I wanted to talk about. And at the timing of my retirement coincided with it was election time, and there was I had so many thoughts about that. And so I knew I had wanted to write. And when I started writing, it just sort of came out as humor, just because it's how my brain thinks. And so then I just started writing more and more humor, and then decided to study it more officially, and took classes.
But you are naturally hilarious.
I am naturally mouthy, and
I translate as hilarious.
Hilarious. It's kind of how I think is with humor, and I diffuse tension with humor. I avoid difficult situations with humor. I just use humor in my life. It's my go-to, so it made sense that it would be my go-to in writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and then you said you took classes, you decided to study it. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I did, the COVID was really helpful for me as far as that goes, in that I had access to classes, and I know we all did, that normally wouldn't be accessible to us, right, that they moved online. And so I did the full satire program through Second City out of Chicago. And so that was a 3-course series, and I don't remember how many weeks each was. And then I got a really fabulous writing group through the Second City. And then I've taken classes through Gotham's in New York, and through 92nd Street Y. Pandemic University has been wonderful. Catapult. Alyssa Bassist is one of the most brilliant writers. She is the editor at Funny Woman over at Rumpus, and I'll take any class she offers anytime she offers it.
Wow.
And just classes here and there, but I really, really knew that I would need to study it if I wanted to do this for real. So
we will include all of these in the show notes.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you for that amazing list.
Yeah. No, there's some great classes out there.
Yeah. So then you wanted to write humor, but then you're writing satire as well. What does satire mean to you? And what does it take to hook readers using sarcasm and irony as you do?
So humor, I think Sleep Left Me for a Younger Woman, that piece that you heard on Writing Class Radio, I think.
And it's in the chat. If anyone is like, oh, I haven't read it, you should read it. Okay. It's fantastic.
I think that's a straight up humor piece. In that, when I think of satire as attacking a person or an institution that is larger or bigger than me, and that I have concerns about. So you can do that through humor, through irony, through exaggeration, through, whatever, various methods. But satire has a target. Humor is just silly fun. So I wrote, when I was talking, about politics and religion, and I say religion, I mean Texas religion, which is different than I think a lot of you in the rest of the country. When I was writing about those, of course, those are satire, because the political stuff and the religious stuff is really more of an institutional target. And then, some of the other stuff I write is just silly. But I enjoy doing both, depending on how angry I am. I use satire for anger. So
use satire for anger.
Yeah, when I'm angry. So I think there's a piece that I really like that I wrote about questions that you should, 60 questions that Kamala Harris must answer before we can vote for her as Lady Vice President. Because I was so angry that everybody was always asking her about, like, did she have children? Was she going to have children? What about her stepchildren? What did her husband think about her being on the kid? I mean, it was just so misogynistic. And so I wrote a piece of just like all of these crazy questions that she was being asked. And then, of course, a lot that she wasn't, but, it was humor.
To prepare for. Where is that published?
So that's on my website, which is luciefrost.com, and Lucie is Lucie. They're under the writing tab. There are a whole bunch of pieces there. And so I can put the link to that in the...
I will put it in the show notes. I want to point out for anyone who's watching live or the replay that you can connect with Lucie. I'm going to give you all the ways now and later. Through Instagram at Lucie H Frost, and on Facebook, same. Her newsletter is hands down the funniest thing I have ever read. I look forward to it every time it arrives. I click on it, and but on everywhere else, she's Lucie H Frost except her website. So
and my website, Lucie H Frost, gets you there too.
Oh, perfect.
So
yeah. But highly recommend. And the Instagram is amazing. Just the series of videos is incredible. So I'm sorry to have interrupted you. I should have mentioned all of these earlier. Let me go back to my next question, which is I will go and make sure that we link to that article too, or that essay too, that's on your blog. But your writing you're touching on such personal topics a lot of the time that can be bittersweet or sad if they're written from a different perspective, from a different person or a different subgenre or even memoir. So when you're writing these, what's your inspiration for turning that piece into something that people can access and still feel through satire? Like, do you also write memoir? Because you're really writing about, in Sleep Left Me for Another Woman, you're writing about menopause.
Right.
And there's another writer I really like, Stephanie Weaver, who writes about menopause. And you guys are both writing about it from two very different perspectives. And if none of you know Stephanie Weaver, she also is a genius. I'm a huge fan. So tell me about how you come about writing about these topics that a lot of people write about how you make that different.
Yeah, so and I think you're right. Like, there's Sleep Left Me for a Younger Woman is about menopause. I have a humor piece about migraines. I have one I've recently written but haven't yet sent out, but will soon, about going to your first party after a divorce and just how painful that is. I think, like, I just get to a point, like with the menopause thing, I wasn't sleeping and I was going nuts, and it's like it's hard to say, like, what makes me talk about that in humor versus serious. I think humor is just my go-to way of processing emotions. I don't know why I do that, but it's just sort of how I roll. I certainly have written some serious pieces. I have a piece about the last conversation. My father died of COVID this year, and it was awful. And I have a piece about the last conversation we had. And, that's not something I'm gonna write with humor, right? That was, I wrote a serious piece about, so I've had weight loss surgery years ago, but I wrote a piece about how difficult it is to be on an airplane, well, to live. But that piece was about being on an airplane when everybody's angry that you want to sit next to them when you're larger. So I didn't write that with humor. So there's some that I just know there's no way you can use humor to write it. But I do think humor makes people pay attention to things in ways they might not read a serious essay. And it's like, who wants to read a menopause piece? I mean, I guess a lot of people do, but I don't know that a guy would, but if they see something titled Sleep Left Me for a Younger Woman, well, all of a sudden, maybe that's interesting. And maybe they'll be interested enough to learn a little bit about it. Of course it's a crazy piece, but you still get the idea. Same for migraines. I mean, nobody wants to hear you complain about your migraine, but if you read this piece and read like what all happens when you're having a migraine, it's like, you should know this is happening to people and it's really awful. I just think humor can make things approachable.
I'm struck by how these universal themes are, we're all writing about them. We're all writing about aging and body image and size and other people's perspectives. Our co-founder, Ann Putnam, also just wrote a piece about having had weight loss surgery and being on an airplane. And it was published in Photos Travel.
Oh, wow.
So she and her husband had to travel, had to book flights to Europe, and they had to buy an extra seat, and it's humiliating.
Right.
And also she's like, I don't want to, like, I can't try and fit like this. Like, it's not something I'm going to be doing. And to have to go through that and hours on the phone to, and hers isn't humor. Hers is like, this is happening to me, and here are 3 things you should do if you are, beyond a size 12 in the US sizes. And, this is even after her weight loss surgery. She's like, my thighs are going to need the extra space, and I don't want to squish. It's worth it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's and I think there's some things that, like I said, necessarily have to be approached seriously. But I mean, like, even I wrote a piece about, a satire piece about racism in the Bachelor franchise. And this is before it all blew up. It was just, and then it blew up after that. But I mean, so I think even really serious topics like that can be addressed with satire. And it should be, know.
And they really should be. Right. It makes it accessible. I want to get time to ask you about some other stuff. So a lot of our writers here they're honing their work and they're getting published. They attend our compassionate critiques where they get instant input from other writers. and they're always interested in process or craft or the path to publication. So can you tell us about how you got that piece ready to submit to Slackjaw, or what the process was like writing for Slackjaw? Because I know I learned about it through Writing Class Radio podcast, but it was really multi-steps, and it's not like it came out funny.
No.
Did you start with the headline? Was it in a class?
Yeah, so that one I had, for some reason, that headline, Sleep Left Me for a Younger Woman, was just rolling around in my head. And I knew I needed to write a piece about menopause, but that title came to me. So I wrote that one from the title. That usually doesn't happen to me. Usually I'm writing a piece and then the title sort of comes last. But I was in the Second City class at that time, and I think it was Satire 3 with Brooke Preston, who taught that, and she's fabulous. And so with Second City, you write these pieces, and then you submit them to the group, and then everybody provides input. So I got a lot of input on that piece because, it was one that was workshopped in the class.
Yeah.
I then submitted it to Slackjaw. One thing that's different in Humor Writer for humor, if people haven't submitted to humor sites before, is that there really isn't the concept of simultaneous submission for humor. So you submit at one place and you wait to hear back from them before you submit somewhere else, but they're quicker at responding. So that's just an FYI. So I submitted it to Slackjaw because I thought it would be a good fit there. And I guess over time, you sort of learn what might work best for what site. And Alex Baya, who is the editor there, said, yes, we want the piece, but the ending is confusing. And that doesn't happen often. I mean, usually they say yes or no. And so I really appreciated that. And so he told me what was confusing about it. I rewrote it. I sent it back to him, and he said, it's still confusing. Okay, that never happens that then they take it. I mean, you don't get two bites at that apple. That he very kindly again said, it's still confusing. And so I worked it again and then sent it off to him again. And then it ran. And then Next Tribe, which is a fabulous publication for women 45 and up. If you haven't seen it, strongly recommend it. They reached out and asked if they could rerun that piece. And so it's run in Next Tribe as well. Of course, I reached out to Slackjaw to make sure they were okay with that. Slackjaw was credited, but so that was really cool too, to get it in that audience.
Yeah, that's a couple rounds of revision. When he gave you those revision or that revision note, which it's not the same as edits. It's the same as, this is not working. Please address this. That's a true critique of like, here's something, I'm not going to fix it for you. That's almost the best kind of note of like, I'm not getting it. You go do the work and come back to me.
No, and it was so generous of him to do that, really. And at that time, I had another character in the story, and it was like a neighbor named Martha who then steals it was way too complicated, who then steals sleep from the younger woman or something. It was just too many characters in the story. And Alex was absolutely right about that. Yeah. But it was very generous of him to go back and forth on that with me.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm pointing out that revision isn't always, that comes from a critique, isn't always edits. Right. Sometimes it's, I'm confused, or the title isn't catchy enough, or I think the scene could be more vivid, or can you explain this a little bit more? And that's, that in terms of critique versus a beta read, which it sounds like you were getting some mostly critiques in your Second City class, and then some revision notes from Alex. That he wasn't giving you a change this and here's what I suggest. It was kind of open-ended of here you go. I'm not going to run it until this makes sense, and I hope you can fix it.
Yeah, and I actually, I mean, like you said, I prefer that kind of critique because then it ends up in my own voice, right? And I tend to give I mean, sometimes I'll give an idea of a joke, but normally you want to say, hey, this could be punchier here. It's you're dragging, it starts to lose me here. It's the piece is slowing down here, whatever. And then let the writer make the revisions so that, it's their piece in the end.
Mm-hmm. Because we get so many questions about the difference between beta readers and critique partners and what to ask and what to expect, I think, well, before we opened up and it was just you and me talking, we were talking about that process of, getting input from one person. And, recently one of my clients was saying, or maybe it was somebody in the community, like I got input from my beta reader and she wants me to do this, and this, and I disagree with her notes, but she really does. She was there too. I'm writing memoir and she's my sister, so she really knows. I'm like, oh no, all of those things are wrong. Your beta reader is not your sister. You must have more than one beta reader for your memoir. Your sister's auditing your memoir is not the way to write a memoir. No one is going to fact check your memoir about your own experience, about your childhood in Kansas or wherever you're from. So I'm wondering if you can comment on the beta reader, critique partner, or editorial note.
Yeah. So beta readers, so I have a book manuscript that I'm currently querying. I got beta readers for that. I originally had asked a group of friends if they would each read a chapter, and a bunch of people agreed. And then I thought, yeah, that's not really what I need. As time went on, I was like, I need true beta readers who don't know me, who don't know the stories I'm telling, who don't know my husband. And so then I got actual beta readers. And I was telling you before, some are more helpful than others. I mean, I don't find a beta reader that says, this is hysterical, this is so funny, this is great, this is wonderful, particularly helpful. I do find if somebody, I know we worry as readers sometimes about being too critical. I will tell you as a writer, that's the most helpful to me, is what's not working. That's what I want to know. And as I sort of refined the process, I got to the point where I would ask very specific questions of the beta readers and say, please answer these questions. And once I started doing that, it was just a lot better. It was because then they would know exactly what I was looking for.
Right.
And I would say, where did the manuscript slow down for you? Where did you lose interest? What didn't work for you? So you're sort of giving them permission to say the negative things that you need to hear, what's not working. So that is different than so humor is really, they're real short pieces, usually 800 words-ish. And so our critique partners in that, we are doing a lot of line edits and, fixing little words and, maybe even giving them a funnier word for something. But that's different than an editor is probably going to give you bigger, well, depending on the type of edit, right? But if assuming it's not, a line edit's going to correct your grammar, but the developmental sort of edit is going to give you big picture things. So you really, I think, have to know what you need and then go seek out that sort of help. But for humor pieces, critique partner, and in some sort of writing group trade, there's there are binder groups for humor writing, which, I'm happy to share if anybody wants to reach out to me on that, and get you an invite in. And every Friday, there's a group that you can post your piece on a Google Sheet, and then people will go and look at them and review them and give comments. And then, you have to do it for other people too. It's kind of a swap.
Right. You got to give if you're going to get.
Yes, but it's so that's all free, and those are all humor writers who do it for each other. You do have to be either female or female identifying to be able to participate in that binder group.
Mm-hmm. What is the name of the binder group? Is it Binders Writing?
It's Binders. I'm gonna have to get it to you, but I think it's Binders full of the intersectional comedy writers. But I don't know that it's a public group. Like, I don't know that you can search for it. I think you have to be invited to it, which is why I say reach out to me. You can search for it and see if you find it, but if you don't, it might be because it's not a public group.
Yeah. Like the creative nonfiction community is a private group, but you can search for it and ask to join.
Okay. And it may be like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can search real quick and see.
Yeah. Okay, we'll share the link to it in the show notes. And I think what's important to say is that you have more than one beta reader. You have more than one critique partner.
Absolutely.
You get more than one voice and input. I saw Mona said the same thing. Like you can't, you could, but please don't change your work based on one person's opinion. If you're going to have multiples, wait and see what they say, then compile the input. And if half the people like it the way it is and half the people say this is confusing, then you get to consider that.
Right.
And then make a choice.
Now, the one exception to that, and it's, particular, I think, to humor stuff, well, not necessarily, but is that a lot of times, if you're writing a piece about something topical that's happening in the news at this moment, you have to get it out of the door and be the first one there for them to accept it. And for example, I wrote a piece when Jeffrey Toobin exposed himself on a Zoom call, accidentally, but still. So I wrote, and then he said that he meant to mute his video. So I wrote a piece called "I Meant to Mute My Member," and all about sort of his having exposed himself. And so that's one that I probably wrote in an hour, maybe, and I shot it off, and I think they had it up on the site at Greener Pastures. I think they took it and it was up 20 minutes later. It was just like the world's fastest thing, because for those sorts of things, they have to hit quick or else the news cycle's gone.
Right. When the penis speaks, you really need to
you gotta listen.
Give it the full platform.
Right. So anyway, that would be the exception where you just don't have time to have somebody else look at it.
Mm-hmm. But by then you had the revisions and the critique that you'd been getting, they really impact your whole work, your whole body of work.
Of course.
It's not just about that piece. It's about landing a surprise and giving a sort of breadcrumbs that lead to the surprise, and how every line turn has to deliver that like chuckle. Right. Even if it's an internal chuckle, and you're synthesizing that into the way you write.
Of course. Yeah.
Let me check the chat here, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to look at it and talk to you.
No, you don't have to look. This is why we go back. Okay. So Mona says, my first mother-in-law, who I loved dearly, called me Frank because whatever I said, whatever was on my mind, I was young and had no filter. All right, Frank. Well, you have so many names now. And Julie says, I'm so impressed you were able to not say what was on your mind. A lawyer in Texas who didn't fit in with all those Texans. And sleep is so fickle. She did that with me too. Lucy, I love how you differentiate things, says Mona. Oh, Julie, I lived in Texas. Husband was born there. We have special relatives.
We all do.
Special. I like that, special. Mona likes that too. Julie, so sorry about your dad. We're in pugs. Have you written about the stupidity of Texas abortion with humor?
I have not, but I am so mad about it. But I haven't, I just haven't.
Can't take on everything. Yep.
Yeah.
Humor is the way to deal with some subjects, says Julie. I was a child Catholic in the Deep South in the 60s.
Yeah.
Her humor was a crutch for her. Rachel says Rachel's book is out on submission right now. And yeah. So she wrote a scene in a funeral that was funny, and it was interesting getting feedback. She left it in the book, but also fired the editor who didn't seem to have a sense of humor.
Ah, good. Yes. This is going to be crazy. And at some point I will use this in a piece or in a book or somewhere. Dead serious. My dad at his viewing, his pacemaker, they had forgotten to turn it off at the hospital. No. And so his pacemaker started beeping because the battery was weak. And so it was just the worst sort of comedy of errors, but it also added this levity that we really needed because we were all afraid to walk up to the thing because as we would walk up, it would beep, and it was just awful. And so that'll hit a piece at some point. It just hasn't made it yet.
Yeah, those things are harsh. I cannot imagine. And
it was awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mother died just before COVID, and in 2019, which is responsible, one, for pushing me to quit my big time comfy corporate job. We talked about that when I was like, when you become an adult orphan, you don't give a hoot about any more meetings, about the meeting that's going to happen before the meeting, the next meeting, which was my whole life. Yeah. And then when she was cremated, and then you get the urn back, and my sister and I were like, do you think the bullet is still in there? Because when we were little, she was bartending as a second job because she was a teacher, so she needed a second job. Single mom I had a deadbeat dad, and there was a break-in, and some Yahoo shot like a shotgun, like I don't know what kind of gun that is, but there were shells in her spine or near her heart that were never removed. So she had, walked around with a bullet in her for 60 years. So we were like, well, that doesn't melt, in the crematorium. Like,
oh, wow. So you're going to have the little pellets.
Yeah, little pellets of the shotgun shells. Yeah. And so the guy at the funeral home said, like, well, that could be like also dental filling. Like, can you sieve it out? Can you, like, we want that. I want to make a necklace out of that, but I also don't want her fillings. That's right. I don't know where her fillings, but that bullet is like awesome.
Speaking of that, in my manuscript, I have a thing that about funeral directors. You can have the fillings, gold fillings, removed from the deceased before they cremate them. And they won't do it for you, but they will provide a room if you want to have a dentist go in and remove the gold, just in case that ever comes up for you. You might want to know.
That would have been super helpful.
Sure. Anytime.
Yeah. You can also have your loved one's ashes fused into a crystal.
Ah, lovely. There's an artist in Houston who makes paintings out of cremains, unclaimed cremains.
Unclaimed cremation. Who gets them?
That's a huge problem. And that's in the book too. Unclaimed cremains is an enormous problem for funeral homes, which is crazy to me. I guess people maybe, I mean, I don't know if they can't afford it, but then you would think prepayment would be a thing. But, or they think that the cremation is the last step of the process and don't know that you have to pick it up, or maybe it just emotionally, it's too much to go get I don't know, but it's an enormous problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to think on that. I can't imagine.
Oh, that's a good question. Mona asks, or the unclaimed, the homeless. Maybe so. Maybe they're
perhaps. Yeah. Mona, let me just go through the questions again. Mona says, I've had trouble recently with personal essays. I have had several rejections, but prefer poetry. I told you about her poetry before.
Yes, you were saying it's.
I do love it. Mona, can you type in the type of poetry that you write? You're doing that class for the Baltimore Public Library pretty soon. I did a workshop for the Baltimore Public Library last month, just about promoting yourself as a writer and what you should prepare for. And they put a personal, a plea in our group for, like, if anyone else wants to do a workshop, and they also pay. They give you, it's like a stipend, $100 stipend. Let me go back down. So Mona says, my critique partner is great. We are honest with each other. Sometimes she says, I hope you don't think I'm mean, but no, nobody thinks, right? You're asking for your critique partner. You're not asking for a criticism. A criticism is mean. A critique is collaboration. So we've got to nail that.
And I think we've probably all had critique partners or readers at various points in our lives that we don't really use anymore because they're, maybe not, you don't feel like they're there to raise you up. And I don't think you should feel at all bad about saying this person doesn't bring out the best in me. For whatever reason. But yeah, no, anybody I continue to get critique from is someone who is kind, who wants to genuinely help me. And I want the same for them. Mm-hmm. And so,
Yep.
That's table stakes.
Yep, table stakes. Okay, so Mona says Vider poetry.
Oh, that's the poetry.
Mm-hmm, yep.
Okay.
All right, let me get back to my questions because I have a lot. So can we talk about voice for a minute? Because we're always talking about voice. I am always talking about be voicey, even in your bio, even in your social profile, the 75 characters that you get, you can still be voicey. So we're always encouraging people to develop their voice, their style, the content that they can own that's like no one else. And you have this unmistakable voice. Perhaps because you grew up in Guadalajara, Mexico. Maybe it's because you're constantly thinking about language because of that, or because of your HR background. People parse a lot of language and you have to read between the lines. I'm not sure, but HR folks, they walk a tightrope. So can you talk about how you develop this voice and how it shows up in your Instagram feed and your newsletter, which if you have not subscribed to Lucie's newsletter, it is like a little gift from the e-gods that it examines words and phrases and reveals their very surprising definitions in a total chortle belly laugh way that you go, well, first of all, I feel smarter. And also I got a surprise and a belly laugh out of this. What's wrong with that? And they grab me every single time. So please describe your voicey, evolution.
Yeah, so I think when I first started putting things out, so I first started with Twitter, and you just sort of learn where you're most comfortable. And now for me, it's not Twitter because I am not so much a one-liner sort of person, I don't know. So I have gravitated to Instagram, although I use words on Instagram, not pictures. And so or I do reels, videos.
I love the reels.
Good.
I'm stuck doing the reels. They're so awesome.
Thanks. Good. I'm glad you like them because they're new, and I was nervous to be on camera at first, or uncomfortable. It just felt not so much uncomfortable as I didn't know if it was sort of egotistical. Mona's saying she's more on Twitter. I do email out my Instagram daily, and that's what Allison is talking about. So if you want to be on that, you can my email address is lucie@luciefrost.com. You can just shoot me an email and I can add you to that email list. And I will give Allison the link for where you can go to my website and sign up there.
It's already put the website in, and we'll make sure that people can get to it. It's on the website. It's luciefrost.com.
Yeah.
You can sign up.
So I think at first I was really nervous about offending people. And because I know, particularly down where I am in Texas, it's like if I am talking about politics and religion, I know I'm going to offend people, and I'm going to offend people that I really care about and that I love. And so at first I was really restrained. And then over time, I'm like, you know what? If I offend people, they don't have to read it. Now, I don't, on my personal Facebook page, put much of anything like that. Now, I have an author Facebook page and a personal Facebook page, and I put, my snarkiest stuff goes on Instagram and my author Facebook page, where people can choose or choose not to read it, And then I've just found over time that the more authentic I am to who I really am, the more people relate to you. Just in general as a person, and the people who don't like the way I think unsubscribe and go away, and that's fine. And they can, and so I would say gotten more, for me, voiciness is just being more authentic. And so just giving myself permission to really say what's on my mind and not so much worry about the risks. Now, I do take care not to write things that will hurt a community, right? But I don't usually think things that'll hurt a whole community of people.
Well, specifically sorry to interrupt, in your Instagram feed, you're really presenting words and phrases almost as pulling the wool back to say, did you realize this word actually means this, not the thing that you think it means?
Right.
And it's kind of a nice parallel to your longer work, your essays and your articles, because it's just a phrase or it's just a word. What is a mountain? How is a mountain different than a hill? I walked away with knowledge and laughed, and I also repeated it to other people. Did you know this? I had no idea. Can you believe that? I have no clue. And so the identifying that is going to be your lane for social, it's such a sticky way of getting your content out in your voice, and it's one word.
Yeah. And it's also that it's authentically me, because I'm so freaking curious about everything. So I'm looking this stuff up anyway. It's not like I'm doing it for Instagram. I'm already doing that all day long, every day. I'm like, what's that? Why is that? Yeah. So it's just putting out the things that I'm already looking up. So,
I don't know. I had no idea that a mountain has essentially the same definition as a hill.
I know. I didn't either. And that's what, and these things come up in your everyday life. We're in the hill country in Texas, and I'm like, I don't know, that's a pretty big hill there. I think it's a mountain. Rich is like, that's not a mountain. I'm like, well, what is a mountain?
Says
what is the difference? And then, so then I go look it up. you know.
Yep. It reminds me a lot of Amanda Montell's work. Do you know her? The Word Slut.
Word Slut. Loved it.
Loved it. And her new cult talk, I think.
Yes.
And her Instagram reels from a couple of years ago are how she ended up getting that book deal for Word Slut, because she was just, as a linguist, I think her parents are college professors. She grew up in Baltimore too, so we're going to talk about Baltimore a lot today. And then she was just taking these words, these sort of this feminist take on words about women, and doing like, what is it and why is it, little videos for, I think she was working for a beauty blender or a Bustle, and she was a beauty writer. And then on the side, she had this little like passion project, and that's what turned into her book.
Wow. Well, mine's actually started when I retired. And when I retired, I had all these great plans about what I was going to do. And I was going to go work at the immigrant detention centers doing pro bono legal work. But when I went to actually do it, it was so heart-wrenchingly difficult that I was not emotionally equipped to make that my life's work as much as I wanted it to be. And that's a whole nother story. But anyway, once I realized I couldn't do that, I ended up on the couch watching 90 Day Fiancé and drinking wine. I mean, seriously, that's all I did. And I was like, I got to get out of this funk. How am I, so then I was like, well, if I'm gonna be watching 90 Day Fiancé anyway, I'm going to learn about how the fiancé visa process works. So then I learned all about that. And then it was just like one thing to the next. And then I started watching Downton Abbey, and they have all these words I don't know about. And I didn't really know who Guy Fawkes was when they were talking about Guy Fawkes Day and what his whole story was. And so then I'm researching that. And then I started writing about these things I was researching, and it just kind of came through that.
What is Guy Fawkes Day? Fawkes.
So Guy Fawkes, which is Fawkes, was a guy who tried to blow up the parliament, but they went and caught him before that. I mean, he and a group of others, and now there's a celebration day for saving the parliament. That's not a great explanation at all. But
wait, he tried to blow up the parliament, or he tried to save it?
No, he tried to blow it up, and but they kept him from doing it.
And now they celebrate.
But wait a minute, I could be wrong about that. Maybe I should go read that again. I could be wrong.
I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe they do celebrate that.
I think he was the one that, well, somebody can Google that while we're talking. I think he was the one.
Fact check this. Yeah.
But I could be wrong. I could have it backwards. He could have been.
Now that we have you on the phone, I'm like, but in person, like, I would like to fact check all of these details.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how you're writing really about these personal details about work and love and memoir and your own experience. And we talked about revision and getting input from many people, but when you're giving, well, if you could give advice to those who are writing about these topics, whether it's menopause or getting your butt in an airplane seat, or just writing through the hard stuff using humor and satire, what advice do you have for anyone else?
Well, I think you have to write it first with no input. I mean, and that, most importantly, without your own input, without self-editing as you're writing, and just sort of vomit it out on the page, and really just get every feeling and thought that you have about a topic out there. One thing I do when I'm writing humor, like if I knew, somebody mentioned would I write about Texas abortion, or had I written about it? I haven't yet, but if I were going to, I would take, I mean, just as my personal process, I would take a blank piece of paper and write every thought, every word, everything that I associate with Texas abortion. So it might be like 6-week ban, Greg Abbott, Planned Parenthood, it'll be really straight things. And then, just any words, any associations, I have it all. And just sort of get all of that on just some random piece of paper. And then it just gives me sort of this thought thing. And then I kind of make thought bubbles out of them. So as I'm doing that, it'll give me ideas, because you can't write about abortion is too big of a topic to write about, right? So it'll give me ideas about what in particular do I want to write about that topic, and how, what might be a way to approach it. Like maybe if I were writing humor, what other thing could we have a 6-week ban on that would be so ridiculous? Like how else am I going to flip it to make it something that's interesting? And I can't do that off the top of my head here, but I would try to think of, okay, what's anything else you could put a time to? What if we put a 6-week limit on hunting? Or I don't know what.
A hunting license, sure.
Like or whatever. You have to know that the baby deer is no more than 6 weeks old to kill it, or or I don't know what that stuff. But so I'd put all that on a paper, and then sort of get ideas that way. But
do you do everything longhand?
So when I am brainstorming, I do. When I'm writing, I don't. I do that on the computer. But if I'm just making like a thought, that's all longhand. And I'll set a timer sometimes. Like if I don't even know where to begin, I'll set a timer for 10 minutes and go for 10 minutes. I'm just going to write down every word that happens. Yeah. And sometimes, I use timers a lot for my writing.
I do too.
I mean, and sometimes, like if I can't think of anything to write, I will, I'll say whatever. I'm gonna write for 20 minutes, right? So, and if I'm sitting there and just nothing's coming to me, I will just make a list, any sort of list about anything, a list of things I want to write about, a list of things I like, a list of things that annoy me, a list of anything, and those lists will then something usually comes out of them. I'll start writing a list of things that annoy me, and then there'll be a good one on there and go, oh, that would make something good.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I use this. I don't know if you've seen this timer.
I got that same one.
What?
I've got the same one. Mine goes up to 45 minutes though. Mine's black.
Really?
And has a 45. But I love that thing.
This is for anyone who doesn't know, this is my ADHD timer. I'm sure with Lucie, it's her productivity timer. I found it through the podcast ADHD for Smartass Women. My client, Tracy Otsuka, is the host, and so she espouses this. So that way you don't lose. When people with ADHD, like moi, we go time blind. We have time blindness. So when we're doing something we like, which I love working with authors to help them get published and market their work. Like essentially when I'm working, I go blind to everything. And so I have to know that my kids are standing in the rain waiting to be picked up from school. They don't like to be soaking wet like a drowned rat. So I've got to know, I have to at least keep track of that time. This is how I do it. And then so you put, like if I was going to say 10 minutes, you put that on top and then it beeps, and then at 10 minutes it goes off. And so that way I don't have to constantly be setting my phone or whatever.
And see, and I use that thing because it keeps me from looking at the clock, because otherwise I'm like,
also, you keep
7 minutes, 6 minutes.
Right. You don't allow yourself to just be doing the thing.
Exactly.
I tend to, if I do scribble things, they end up in a pile right here. There's a pile of stuff right here. And so that's why when I do need to rant and scribble, sometimes I voice scribble into my otter.ai app.
Oh,
which is just voice to it's a transcription service, and it's free. Free is good, people. So otter.ai, and I have written entire articles that way, just on a rant, and then 15 minutes walking the dogs around, and I come back and I've got a $1,400 or 1,400 word essay that can be edited down to 900 words, and I have gotten published that way. Because sometimes, if you're not looking at the words come out more meaningfully and with more passion and richness and story. So highly recommend.
And speaking of that, I always read everything I write aloud before I submit it, just so that it's in my voice, because otherwise it gets really righty and isn't as voicey.
Right. And someone could be editing your work for grammar and you think, that's not how I say that.
Right.
I like a turn of a phrase. So even when we were talking, I think I said something and you said, oh, I'm going to write that down. I'll look that up. And I'm thinking, that's my way of chit-chatting. Hazel, did you want to say something? Come here. Okay, come here. Come here. You're crazy.
Oh, so cute.
Hello. Yes, hello. Okay.
So cute.
Yeah. Let me go back. Hey, stop. Okay, one more question. So what's next for you since retirement? What are you're writing every day, you're putting out this newsletter, your Instagram reels are, happening, and you're querying. Tell us what actually you're doing.
Yeah, so I am I'm querying a manuscript, crossing my fingers that something comes out of that. I am really focusing on Instagram and platform in general, just because my manuscript's nonfiction, so platform becomes extra important, and really trying to get myself out there. I am trying to write more essays, and really, and that's a learning thing for me too, right? Because all I've written is humor, and so I tend to go to humor instead of just real vulnerability. So that's something I have to practice and get better at. The topic of my nonfiction book, it is about post-retirement life and how I moved from the sort of the stagnation of not knowing what now is my purpose or meaning, without the structure of and sort of status or whatever it is of a job, like who the hell am I now, and how I came to that through this path of curiosity. And in general, how I think it's an approach that will work for other people too in other areas of your life when you're stuck. Like, not to try to say, what's my big passion? You'll never know, right? It's just like, what's the next thing I'm curious about? That's all we got to do.
Yeah.
So, but it is just a combination of telling the story of coming out of the retirement, but also of these interesting little facts I learned on the way. So.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yes. In probably February or March, I'm doing a lot of travel in February, but probably March then, I'm going to start working on the next book. And so I already have, but I'm not talking about it yet because it's not, it's still in its little bubble.
Mm-hmm.
But I know what I'm going to write next. And so I'm ready to get started on it. But it's going to be a humor book, but it's going to be more of a humor gift book, not a memoir. It's just.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. So I'm excited about it. It's going to be fun. So
I can't wait to hear more about that. Okay, we have some questions, so I'm just going to read through. So Rachel asks, what's your target number of words you'd aim for with essays or articles?
Well, it depends who I am aiming it for. So when I write something, depending on what it is. So if it's a straight up humor, if it's a humor piece, I might write it and then decide where I'm going to try to place it. But if it's an essay, I'm usually going to be writing it with an eye of who I think it might be good for. So I'm going to be sort of looking at their word count. I tend to do better in shorter pieces. So like if I see somebody has a 4,000 words, that's way too long for me. I don't have that much to say about much of anything. So, I'm generally in the 1,000, 1,200-ish.
I feel like you can, if you feel like writing the essay that's going to be 1,200 words, just know that it can be edited to 900.
Right, exactly. It's easier to edit
a 900 version and a 1,200 version.
Yep.
It's possible, believe me. And Rachel also asks, how can I figure out more respected places to publish? I don't want to waste good pieces on lesser publications online.
So are we talking humor specifically, or?
I don't think so. I think Rachel is writing, her memoir is about having been a deaf teacher, teaching deaf children in hearing schools, and what she knows from being profoundly deaf, from being a teacher of deaf children, and having to navigate the education system with hearing administrators who don't realize that American Sign Language is an actual language. It's not just charades. I'm sorry, Rachel, I'm speaking for you, but I've read your work, so I know, and I am indignant, less so than you, having lived it, but it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, so there is a site that I've seen that ranks that, and I don't write for literary journals, it's just not the sort of thing I write, but I know that there is a site that ranks literary journals based on, is it based on their pushcart nominees, or it's based on something. I think it's based on pushcart. And gosh, Allison, you would be better at answering this question than I am, just because I'm so humor directed, which is.
Yeah. Well, here's the key about finding publications that have larger readerships. Okay, so what Rachel, what you're asking is, and what I often tell my clients and everyone in this community is, there's no sense submitting your essay to a publication that has, even if it's a publication on Medium, which Slackjaw is on Medium, correct?
It is.
But Slackjaw has hundreds of thousands of readers, and but you could also be submitting to a publication that has 50 readers or 50 subscribers. So you want to think about, where's the best place for my work that will offer me discoverability amongst your readership. And so, Rachel, your readership, the ideal reader for you is are parents of children in schools, because those are the ones who need to understand your perspective, and parents, particularly parents of deaf children, but I would go for parents, period, because people don't know if their child is going to be profoundly deaf or hard of hearing or have some sort of impairment at all. Lots of people, wear hearing aids, or sometimes they get the cochlear implant, and what they should know and what they should ask for, and it has crossover to any kind of 504 or IEP plan in education. So you should always be thinking, oh, if I pitch if I pitch something for parents, well, now you have a publication that has over 1 million readership, and then you can balance that out with something else that's maybe smaller, like Romper or Scary Mommy, or or AARP. You could be talking to grandparents because you are, AARP. I mean, I just turned 50, and the moment I got my membership, do you want to join our membership? Yes, I do. I certainly do, because the rating is good. I like the rating. The discounts are great, but I like all the content. So, and it's smart stuff. So just know that, your publications, you should try and focus on readership, and then obvious discoverability. And then if you get published in one, so say you're getting published in, sorry, Hazel's going behind me, that's my dog. If you're getting published in Parents magazine, say, or even Parents Online, it still counts. And you need to diversify, because you don't want to just say like, oh, I've only ever been published in Parents, unless they're going to give you a column. So you want Parents and Parenting. Yes, that's good. But Parents and something else that's sort of tangential rounds out your portfolio of where your work shows up. So Lucie's portfolio of where she's been published is a good example. I'm sure, Lucie, you don't plant all of your work in one publication. No,
yeah, but I started out with smaller ones and kind of moved up, and
that's a very polite thing to do. What I would say is there's no barrier to entry. There's not. You do not have to put in 10 years just working and submitting to small publications in order to get the big one. The big one wants your work too, but it wants it to be good. And if you're certain that it's good, then pitch it.
I would pitch anywhere now.
Yeah.
I pitch anywhere now, but I did have to learn. I mean, I had to learn how to write. I haven't done that.
Yeah. So Julie asks about otter.ai. Otter.ai is I'm going to pull it up so you guys can see what it is on my app. Otter. Of course. Where did it go?
Loved your glasses.
Oh. Thank you, Lucie. Okay, this is what it looks like, otter.ai. So it gives you, if you can see this, like an agenda. It says agenda today, and then it tells me, and then at any time I can say, I can pop for this guy down here, and it says new recording, and it starts recording my voice as I'm speaking. And I could be transcribing this entire conversation, and it is taking notes for me. And then it can email me a Word document. Yeah, that's right, Rachel. Rachel and I are speaking the same language. And it's great. First of all, it's free. Free is good. Second, otter.ai is an improved version of what used to be Dragon Dictation, which is great. So it's different. They're competing, but Dragon Dictation is also a good one. What I like about Otter AI is that you can get the upgrade for about $100 a year, and then it will identify 2 voices or multiple voices. So if you're having a conversation, if you're interviewing a loved one, this is very helpful so that you know who is speaking, and it'll say speaker 1, speaker 2, and it'll identify, or speaker 3. I have actually transcribed cassette tapes of when I used to interview my grandmother, who died 20 years ago. She lived to be 97, and I would sit with my aunt and uncle, or my mom and my uncle, and interview my grandmother about, what the 1920s were like and what dating was like in the 1930s. And there are a lot of voices, and Otter AI distinguishes them. So I like that. let's see. Mona says there is NPD.com that lists a lot of types of journals. I think that's better for literary journals, right? I think if you're going to try and go broad to, this is not about platform building. This is about discoverability. You have to be a discoverable voice to the audience who's sitting there already looking for you. They, you know, they subscribe, they want to be challenged in Marie Claire, or they want something savvy in glamour. And you can, savvy might not be, it's not fashion anymore. It's being a woman for glamour. So Julie asks, is finding where we should publish a Google question? Sure, you can Google, well, don't Google where can I get published? You can Google names of media outlets for parents or for grandparents, and Google will deliver all of those. And if you would read them, then chances are your audience would read them. And then you can go to their website, but you're not going to find where to submit. You have to open a different window and ask Google, just type in the media name and submissions, and it'll take you right to, you know, a separate page. So you'll be able to find that. And I am working on a cheat sheet for where you can submit. So you can stay tuned on that. I'm putting that together for everyone. So let's open this to questions now that we've sort of caught up in the chat. If you want to unmute, you can just, Mona, you're always good for, I'm asking you to unmute because you always have something interesting to add.
Are you saying I'm always Frank?
No, yes, I'm going to start calling you Frank from now on.
Yeah, when I was teaching, when in my homeroom, some of the kids were very, very unresponsive to writing, and we would have specific writing days. So I love your idea of setting a timer, because we only had like 20 minutes for homeroom, and I would say you had to write for 20 minutes. And the way you said that, you would just give yourself a time to jot down any ideas. And even if you didn't have any ideas, you would just list things. And I put in the chat, why didn't I think of that? Because that harkened me back to my homeroom days. I told the kids, even if you don't have anything to write, just write, my stupid teacher is making me write, over and over and over again. And some kids really, really got into it. They loved it. So yeah, I could do that sometimes if I really wanted to write and couldn't think of anything. Sometimes it's the opposite of that. But yeah, I really like that idea of the timer. It made me remember that. So thank you.
I don't think I'd get much of anything written without a timer. I got to have that external constraint on me usually. So.
It's almost like developing some sort of urgency.
Right, right. Yeah.
This is my time, and otherwise the minutes bleed into the hours, and then you're getting ready for bed.
Right.
And I love the fact that you were talking about me before I came on. Thank you.
Yes. Tell me about your writing and your great poetry.
Right. Mona had wrote 2 or 3 dystopian novels in the last year, and I've been so lucky. She's been coming to the compassionate critique sessions that we hold on the opposite Sundays, and we've been working on her query or her first page, and it's so like daring and interesting and just really positioned so well. So.
And my grandson helped me today, because I was over there to spend the night with my 16-year-old twin grandsons last night. So aww. Yeah, one of them helped me this morning. So yeah, cool. He really got into it. So,
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, querying is tough. And I know, Mona, sometimes you have to just be ready to jump when you see an agent or you see a publisher say, we're interested in this. And so just a reminder, I did just on Friday do a webinar that I'll send out tomorrow to the community or to anyone who registered for a webinar of how to query smart, just like the best basic things that you should know about structure and whether there's a good time or not. Spoiler, it's always a good time. If somebody's open for business, they're open. And how to really make a hard hitting, premise, plot, pro, which sometimes they say, hook, book, cook. But before I learned about that, I always called it premise, plot, pro, format. And then coming on December 21st, I'm doing an actual paid workshop. If you want to actually see my process, get all my cheat sheets, and the query tracker, and then have your work critiqued during the class, you can join that. That's and see how I'm able to put together winning queries in less than an hour, queries that get responses right away. So let's see, new message. Okay, so yeah, Julie says I have to do this for 45 minutes or whatever. Yes, Rachel said, for being cancer plus COVID plus the book topic made me super urgent about my book. I worked 75 hours a week usually. That's a lot. That's a lot to put on a body that is resisting cancer and protecting yourself from COVID. And there's something about the like guardianship of a book and the passion that can really propel you through. I'm so happy that you're sharing that with us. It's big. Yeah. Okay. Lucie, any last words before we call this chat complete?
I don't think so. It's just been so much fun to talk to everybody and visit. So,
well, I should say for anybody who's watching the replay, if you want to work with Lucie, she is available at luciefrost.com. She shared with me, she has some spots open. She's has very few spots, but few spots open in February and March. You can email her after the holidays. It doesn't have to be now, and get in touch. And Lucie, if you don't have space, you'll point people in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm good about pointing people to classes. So if you have any questions about those, happy to always recommend some good ones on that.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening, great rest of the year, and please show up for our compassionate critique. Our next compassionate critique is January 12th. So we're taking a little of a hiatus. I will be doing that workshop December 21st. Other than that, see you in the new year. And you can always reach out to me for a one-on-one power hour if you're still working on where to pitch or refining that query or whatever. You don't have to wait, and you don't have to kind of surreptitiously show up to a compassionate critique and hope to get time with me. You can book it directly at AllisonLaneLiterary.com.
So much fun. Great.
Lucie, you're incredible. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. See y'all. Bye.
Bye.